What's up, YouTubians? Gary, VW Jawbreaker. Welcome back to another engine build. Today we're starting on a new one. We've got our block sitting here, our case sitting here, ready to go. It's already been machine checked, the whole 9 yards, so we're ready to start throwing some parts in there. This is going to be a 1968cc build. Yes, that means it's a 92 by 74. So we have a 74 millimeter stroke crank sitting here. Got a set of rods, and you're probably thinking, man, 92s and 1835, those run hot, those aren't good. Don't worry, these are actually thick wall 92s. So these are 92 cylinder, 94 head. And we got a set of Panchito heads there. I'll drop a 100 cam in this thing. Should be a really nice, very nice engine. Could be going in his bus, could be going in his Baja, could be a spare motor. I don't know. But what we need to do is we need to go ahead and mock up the crank and the rods, drop it in the case, and see just exactly how much we're going to need to clearance, if any at all. Because if you think back on the last video where we did the 1760cc engine that we're building for Jawbreaker, we had to clearance quite a bit. That's because of the rods. It's not so much the stroke. I mean, you get up into the big strokes, yeah, you're going to have to clearance the case. But on these smaller cranks, it's not always the crank as it is the rods. So I have here the Empi forged rods that he wants to run, and then of course here is a stock rod. Let's stack them up and see the difference. So when I was building my engine, I had to clearance because things were hitting back here. Now these aftermarket rods, you see the difference? That sticks out quite a bit more, where this is a little bit more rounded. That actually makes quite a bit of difference on your rotating assembly. Nothing more to do than to stop jibber-jabbering, get crack-a-lacking. Let's go ahead and get this crank and rods mocked up, set it in the case. Again, this is not final assembly. We are mocking up. So let's get after it. We've actually got quite a bit of clearance right there. We may not have to clearance this case whatsoever. Put a little extra oil right there in the center. Your rods are pretty much going to be in this general area right here. And I can stick a screwdriver through there. See, it's all about the proper rods. We've got plenty of clearance right over here. Man, I wish I had these rods on my engine. I wouldn't have had to do so much stinking clearancing. So again, this is mock-up, so this is not final assembly. That's why we didn't clean anything first. Just getting that out there. Now, importance of using the right rods. Stock rods, you got to do clearancing. I can literally, man, there's so much room right there. So much room for activities. Your piston is pretty much going to be kind of in between those two case studs. If you see down there, I can fit a screwdriver tip down there easily. Here, hold on. Tons of clearance. Tons of clearance. So what we can do to verify that is we can go ahead and chuck our other bearing in the other half, and then go ahead and stick the other case on there, do the rubber band trick. What's that? I'll show you. Hold on. All right, the rubber band trick. So yes, I don't have the head studs in all the way. You don't need them in all the way. Well, all you're trying to do is hold your rods right there, pretty much in the middle-ish, right? So it simulates the piston being on the rod. And what you can do now is turn it over and see if you have any kind of hitting. And we actually do, ever so slightly. We got a couple of the rod bolts barely touching the spigot here, ever so slightly. But man, if I would have had these rods for Jawbreaker's engine, would not have had to do hardly any clearancing. So we'll go ahead and take and just right up top here, just a little bit out of the spigot right there. Oh, there we go. Keep hitting the head stud, sorry. We'll take just a little bit out of the spigot, and then we'll go ahead and spin her over again and see how she does. So all we're really going to do is just kind of take off just a little bit, just kind of give it a little angle right there, and then we'll go ahead and take a cartridge roll once we know everything's good. Smooth it out, but both sides of the case are done right down there at the bottom. Now we'll go ahead and drop the crank back in it and make sure that everything rotates the way it needs to. All right, I got everything torqued back together, got our rubber bands back on, and nice. Very nice. And now we have plenty of clearance as well in between the spigot and the rod bolt itself. We'll go ahead and pull that around right there. And you should be able to see down in there. Good amount of clearance. I went ahead and did the bottoms as well, as you saw. Just let's just be safe. We're already right there. So easy enough just to do that real quick. And now, oh, you know what? I got an idea. Let's do something. Put the little bolt in the front. This should work. All right, ready? I like it. Now it's just a matter of taking that down, cleaning everything really well. And I'm not going to show you every step on this because this particular video is not a how-to. If you want to see more of a how-to, go check out my playlist, because I've got tons of videos on all types of subjects, all types of different builds, so you can check everything out there. One of the more detailed ones is, of course, Jawbreaker spare engine parts build. It's the 1760cc mini stroker. Check that one out for a lot of the details. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this down and fully flush the case, clean everything up real well, and then we'll go ahead and start micing things, verifying a lot of the clearances on rods, mains, all that stuff, so we can get that all written down on our paper and get that uploaded into our Excel sheet. Now, I did not bother recording this as I started stripping the case down more. You would have had to have been sitting there for the last hour watching this. This was a struggle, but let me tell you how I persevered and show you exactly sometimes what it takes to get things done. So, as you know, you've got your rear and front. This is the flywheel side. Your oil relief control valves. So this one here directs it from, you know, the cooler and whatnot. This one here bleeds off when you have additional pressure. Well, normally this little tool here works really good for, you know, just put it on there and bada bing, bada boom, it's out. I fought that one forever. These should actually kind of, they need to be snug. No, not snug. They shouldn't be loose in there, right? But they shouldn't be snug where they can't free move. Fought this one for literally the last hour. And the only way I found to actually get it out, and I, as you see, vice grips on it, the whole 9 yards trying to get that thing beat out of there. It wasn't that one though, it was this one. Yeah, so I actually had to take a tap, run it down in there, and the reason I did that is I needed to get the tap to bottom out to finally get it to start spinning. And I was soaking it with WD, PB Blast, WD Penetrant, I was soaking it with everything. Once I got it to spin, I was able to tap it out of there. Using just this and beating it, it was not budging. Yeah, welcome to my day. That one was, that one there fought me the worst out of any of them ever. What size tap? Let's look. That is actually a, I can't read it. 1/2 inch NTP, no, 1/2 inch by, I don't know, whatever. It's a normal like little cheap tap and die kit. So it's the 1/2 inch size, regular like 1/2 inch by 13 or whatever it is. So that's what fit down in there. And again, once I was able to tighten it and get this to spin, everything was good. Now, how are we gonna fix that down in there? Doesn't look horrible, but how are we gonna fix that? I actually take, where is it? I got too much stuff everywhere. Aha, here it is. Drill bit, a long drill bit, and I actually tape some emery cloth on there and get it to kind of, it's not snug, it's kind of a loose fit, and kind of run that in and out a few times on low, and that usually cleans them up so they actually move properly. All right, again, so we're gonna take our emery cloth on the drill bit. See, it just kind of fits down in there. That's it. Doesn't take much just to clean up the bore inside. Taking lube it, little WD-40. Now let's go ahead and take the one that came out. Make sure it's cleanish. All right, got it wiped off with a paper towel. Oh, there we go. It actually moves properly now. Nice. It's snug without being too snug. We'll probably take some, I don't know, 1500 grit or something like that. There's a couple little tiny lines in it, so probably take some 1500 or 2000 grit and get that kind of polished up ever so slightly. Again, you don't want this too loose. And it's not loose right now, but it will rotate all the way around, which is what you want. You don't want it to be oblong, or if this was bad, it wouldn't fit down in there right. So we're good. Moving on. All right, we have our case fully cleaned, flushed, everything's good. How do I know it's clean? Well, mostly because I use Super Clean, and it's the only cleaner I use. No, they do not pay me to say that either. It's just literally my experience. It's some of the best degreaser I've ever used, best cleaner I've ever used. I use it in my house, use it on my grill, use it on lots of things just besides engines. So we went ahead and did the rear main drain back seal modification. Just take a file, I use this triangular file, run it in there, and then I kind of bevel it that way, bevel it that way. So normally on your engine case, when it sits up like this right here is your drain back hole. So it's always about that full of oil after you shut it down. So what this does is this allows oil to seep past back into the case so you don't fill so much oil back here. The upper groove allows it to vent and allows it to drain back. It doesn't need to be deep. It's about a fingernail thickness or so. It's not much, but trust me, it helps. I did a whole little hoopla on that on Jawbreaker's engine and a few others, so you can check it out there if you have more questions. So now that both cases are clean, everything's flushed, we're good to go there. Now it's time to go ahead and mark our bearings and check our oil holes and see how well they line up. So we'll go ahead and do that real quick, and then we'll continue to move on. Now for this, you don't need a whole lot. You just need your bearings and some paint of your choice color, a marker, and that's about it. So on your bearing, you've got your dowel that goes towards the back. So we're gonna go ahead and drop that in place, push down. I like to mark both sides. This aids in dropping it in place properly. And then dead center, I put a line, little arrow pointing back towards the flywheel. That's just me, that's what I like to do. You do you. We got the split bearing goes there. We'll check that in a minute. Same thing. And little arrow on the back. This one here is really kind of hard to screw up because that little notch always goes like right here. But we'll go ahead and drop it in and mark it just to make sure. There we go, nice and snug. Now that we have those lined up, let's go ahead and start marking our bearings for the oil hole. Now these do not always line up, that's why I like to do it. That's out of paint, let's get a different one. Little paint, use your lines, line it back up, push it in place, pull it out. You can see right there, the oil hole is barely obstructed by the groove in the bearing. We will clearance that. In order to clean up your saddle if you want, little brake clean. It's like it never happened. All right, let's go ahead and do this one. Push down. And the same thing, just a little bit. It's not bad, but you want them right. You do not want your oil to be obstructed. Now this front one's a little different. It actually has a small hole, so you don't get over oiling to that front. And if you see, that lines up perfectly. So we will not touch this one whatsoever. Do not make that hole bigger right there. Please do not. Now I'll go ahead and check our saddle bearing. Did I put it in right? Nope, I put it in backwards. Same thing, barely. This one's actually better from some of the ones I've seen. So all I did was take a Dremel and radius that just a little bit in that area that we marked. That way you have no obstruction. Oil flows nicely straight into there. It's called fluid dynamics. I'm not an expert, but I know enough. Now that we have the bearing orientation marked, along with the oil passages checked and modified, the case is pretty much done for right now. What we need to do next is go ahead and break apart the crank, because remember, we just mocked this up. We need to go ahead and flush all the oil passages extremely well, clean our rods, lube, put everything together, torque them. Now with these particular rods, with those ARP style bolts, we need to actually make sure you use the ARP fastener assembly lubricant. And then also with your Empi rods, it's going to tell you, kind of give you a little chart and say, okay, there's your part number, there's your part number. These actually go to 38 foot-pounds, and it'll actually tell you. You need to go to 15, check, and of course you want to tighten these evenly. 15, then 30, and then 38. That's pretty much it. Sometimes on ARPs, they actually have what they call a bolt stretch gauge, and you actually torque these until you get the proper stretch on the bolts. Okay, with this style they actually recommend not to. They just say torque it to that, so that's what we'll do. I'll save you all the boring details. We'll go ahead and get all this cleaned up, get this assembled, so we can move on. All right, rods are fully on. Spins nice. Oh yeah, look at that. Measured our side clearance, measured our journal size, all that jazz. Everything is good. Of course, we used our ARP stuff to torque them up. They would normally spin a little nicer, but I've got the real thick ultra slick Permatex on there, which I like. So, but they do spin nice. Now I've got the gears heating up in the house. Yes, I do it in the house on the stove. I don't have a hot plate for the garage, so when the wife comes home, she's gonna be pleasantly happy. Let's go with that. So all we need to do now is go ahead and grab our bearing, make sure it's pointed the right direction. We'll lube it up, slide it on, because once our gear goes on, you're not getting that bearing on. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then, well, I'll pop you in the stand and show you how to put the gears on. It's pretty simple. Now that the gear's heated up, we'll go ahead and slide that on. And now we also need to make sure that I put it on right. There are two dots down here. I'll show you in a minute. That's for your timing. Those are sticking out this way so we can see them, so that's good. Put our spacer on there. All right, now for our timing gear, and then the final C-clip on the end. The timing gear is brass, so it expands much faster than, there we go. I'll go ahead and take our C-clip, put our C-clip on there. I've got these, I don't even know. They're from many moons ago. Pretty sure they were my grandfather's. You're gonna want to be careful too, because the crank's gonna be a little warm. Nice. I like to take a punch and kind of just make sure it's fully seated in. And like I said, right here is your two dots for your timing marks, so always make sure those point out or you're gonna have a bad day. You have to redo it. Like I said, once this bearing's on, yeah, you ain't getting to that. All right, we'll go ahead and let this cool, put on our nose bearing, and then we can go ahead and start assembling into the case. All right, it's just cooled down a little bit. So we got our nose bearing. Oil that up real nice. Very nice. Now we can put on our slinger, and the curve goes away from the crank, which is backwards from I always thought. I don't know why. We're gonna put our Woodruff key in. Crank is built. That's all there is to it. Now with our middle bearing all lubed up, we've got all of our orientations proper. Go ahead and drop our crank in. And now where you line everything up is when it comes into play. Makes life so much easier. All right, now if you want to see if everything's set in place like it should be, take your other half bearing, drop it in. This does not rotate back and forth, so you know your crank is fully set. There we go. Sweet. Crank is in. Now we'll move on to the cam. Now one thing a lot of people don't talk about is on these double thrust cam bearings, especially the silver lines, you're gonna have to kind of file, and I say file, flat sand with some fine sandpaper and get these flat, because they will bind on the cam right here. And you want it so you've got just a couple thousandths of play. You don't want it tight. One of the other things I like to do is rotate the engine backwards and see if the cam's going to jump out. And that's not even oiled, so I know it's going to be fine because, yep. And this is not a clearanced camshaft. And if you see, we still got tons of room right there. So we are a-okay. Cam is good. And believe it or not, I've got my two lines already lined up right there. I like to take a paint pen and throw it on there. Thanks VW Darren for that tip a long time ago. So as you see there, they're lined up. Makes it real easy. Now we can go ahead and get ready to drop our lifters in. One thing you can do is on a higher lift cam, you can actually take and do yourself a groove in between these 2 points right here, just to help with oiling. But in this situation, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to throw ourselves some oil on the lifter itself, drop it down in place. All those are very nice. I'll go ahead and take some of our cam shield from Engle, paint that on there. I don't like this stuff as much as the stuff comes from Scat, but it is what it is. Throw just a little bit of assembly lube on the bearings. Go ahead and put our cam back in for the final time. Now you do not have to break in lube on the cam itself, but in this situation I do this with Engle, not so much Scats, but we are good. All right, so again, we've got everything lubed up. I'll go ahead and throw a little bit more lube on that camshaft right there. Why not? Won't hurt. Butamus. Butamus. Just make sure you keep it out of that groove back there so your cam plug seals. Ask me how I know. Now, one other thing that most people don't talk about much would be oil pump clearance. So on some oil pumps, when you put your oil pump in there, these bolts get really close to your oil pump, and you actually have to clearance the back of the pump or something like that. And this one is good, so we don't have to worry about that. So, all right, things are looking great. All right, cam bearings are in, lifters are in, lifter clips that hold the lifters are in place. Got our cam lube on there. Very thin layer of, I like to use the Yamabond 4. That works really well. Very thin coat, doesn't take much. Wipe off the little bit of excess that may be on the inside. Again, very thin film, you don't need much. No, I do not like using the aviation sealant. But you know what? You do you. Now, I did not put the last half bearing in because I want to ensure, yep, our crank is all the way down in place. So now I can go ahead and put the half bearing back in, and we'll go ahead and get ready to drop this in place. Oh yeah. Drizzle just a little bit on. We have our O-rings in place for the case studs. Almost forgot the cam plug back here. I like to put the cam plug facing in. And again, just very thin bead, doesn't take a lot. This stuff works great. There we go. That's down in place. I like to take just a little dabber do ya on both sides, just to make sure that we've got a nice seal. Now for the fun part, go ahead and stand our rods up. This side is perfectly clean. All right, we're ready to go together. Bippity boppity boop, she's in place. On your case washers here, I like to put just a thin film of RTV on the back. This is ultra black. You use what you want to use, if anything at all. I'll go ahead and put my fancy little pulley on with the handle. And we want to rotate, make sure it feels good. And it does. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start torquing her down. I like to start about 12. Still spins nice. All right, let's go ahead and crank her up. And she still spins nice. Boy, this is gonna be beautiful. Now the only thing left to do is go ahead and do all your perimeter hardware, except for the oil pump. We'll do those last. Well, I buttoned some stuff up. I didn't bring you along. Again, just trying to get some stuff done when I have time. I'm in different clothes. I've done a lot since I've recorded last, and it's only been 12 hours. So let me bring you up to speed real quick. We have the entire bottom end buttoned up. We've got the sump on it. We've got our strainer, sump plate, oil pump. We've got pretty much everything ready to go. I like to do the flywheel and end play later, and I definitely like to do the distributor later. The reason being is when you're mocking up and working on the side, that distributor's sitting right there. I like to wait till later to drop that in. So short block is complete. So here's the thick wall 92s. We got some cylinder shims, so we need to go ahead and check deck height. We've got our cylinder studs, rockers, our Panchito heads, 044 Panchito heads from CB Performance, but we need to remove the dual valve springs for single HD springs. We got our push rod tubes. We got a lot of stuff to get done today. So without further ado, let's jump in, get crack-a-lackin', and let's make this thing happen. All right, in order to figure out your compression ratio, you need to do a couple different things. Step one is go ahead and put a spark plug in your hole, get yourself one of these CC kits, drop your doohickey in, fill this up with water or whatever fluid you want to use, and figure out how many cc's, how many milliliters this combustion chamber holds. And that's step one of figuring out your compression ratio. These I've measured at 62 cc's. There are other videos of me showing how to do this. I'll link it down below. Next step, we need to go ahead and take our cylinder, drop it on with our shims, and double check our deck height. Deck height is how far down does the piston sit into the cylinder. We need a minimum 40, so there's no possibility of piston to valve clearance and whatnot. And you don't want the piston too far down, because then you'll have the combustion in the cylinder and not the head. So let's go ahead and drop this on there real quick for mock-up. Take our shims, and we'll go from there. These shims are actually, we need approximately 40 thousandths, so hopefully I measured that right. I went ahead and pre-ordered these. We've actually got a 30 and a 10, and those together should be 40. Sometimes they're not. You need to check them to verify. But believe it or not, we're actually sitting right about 42. So that's good. Let's mock it up and see what we got. Now first, before we mock up, we need to go ahead and put our head studs in. Now these do not need to be like torqued into the case. You just want them snugged. And if you notice, Let's see if I can do this. See how you can see the light through some of those? Those are not blind case savers, so you can actually see all the way through. So we actually need to put a little bit of sealant on these. You can use a little bit of aviation sealant if you like. That way it seals the threads. Some people like to use some kind of Loctite or something like that. I don't like using Loctite on them, so we'll use a little aviation sealant, paint that on there, run them down in. Bada bing, bada boom. Now we want to take our cylinder, rock it back and forth till we find exactly top dead center. And we want to go ahead and measure, and that's 40. We're a little loose. Let's go ahead and jump it up. You can also use a caliper if you like. I just seem to get a lot better result doing it this way. So that's a 30 and a 12. So that would be 42. Slightly. Let's go to, jump to 14 maybe. There we go. That's exactly it. So we have 14 thousandths, or sorry, that'd be 44,000. So let's go ahead and figure out exactly where we're at. Now on CB Performance's website, AA Performance also has one. Engine bore we know is a 92 millimeter. We know our crank is a 74. Now our deck height is 0.042, right? No, 44. Combustion cc's we know are 62 cc's. We're going to solve for compression ratio. We're at 8.1. This W110 camshaft wants a tad more than that, but I'd rather keep it a little low since we're not sure if this is going in as panel bus or not. So let's get a split window bus. It may go in that. I was hoping for 8.2, but that's all right. 8.1 is close enough. Now, if you wanted to, you could take out your deck height, right? Because you know what your head cc's are. Remove your compression ratio and say, hey, you know what? I want a compression ratio of 8.2. Hit to solve your deck height, and it says we need 0.37. So we need 37 thousandths of deck in order to get an 8.2. Now, unfortunately, it's not quite possible because you want a minimum of 40. So we're at 8.1. Close enough for government work. Now make sure when you check your deck height, all right, we just checked it on cylinder 4 here, I'm sorry, cylinder 3, that you flip it over and check the other side. You want to verify that both sides are the same or as close as possible. Sometimes a case has been decked improperly where they come through and kind of machine this side to get rid of this lip or something, and therefore, you know, you could have one side quite a bit more than the other. It's rare, but it's possible. So always double check that. Check everything. This is engine building, not engine assembling, right? Verify everything. So I'll go ahead and do that off camera, and then we're gonna go ahead and jump on over and start prepping our cylinders and our pistons. Yeah, they're not ready to go out of the box. We need to verify ring gap and clean these things. So we have our cylinders marked, we have our heads marked, so we know exactly what cylinder goes where. So what we need to do now is we need to go ahead and remove our rings to verify our ring gap. So I like to use these little doohickeys here. Makes it a little easier because, well, it sucks breaking a ring. Ask me how I know. Here we go. Take top one off. Take the middle one off. Now, I like to leave the oil control ring on for this because what you want to do, put your ring into the cylinder. And then I use the oil control ring because that's as far down as we can go to square it up and make sure that we are square. Now what we want to do is actually measure that gap right there. We want anywhere between 10 and 16 thousandths is what I usually run for. So we'll start off with 10 and see where we're at. Just kind of run that in there. All right, so that's actually right at 15 thousandths. So that one's actually good. So we're gonna pull this one out, put our next one in, and do the same process. We'll measure this one. All right, that one's good. It's the first time I've actually had them come out right. One thing else you can do is, with all your rings off, everything off, you can actually weigh your pistons in grams. And if you need to, take a little bit of material off here, sand a little bit down here, and actually get these within about a half a gram of one another. Just little FYI. Same thing with your rods. You can actually kind of home balance your rods, if you will. So now that those are done, we'll go ahead and do the same thing with our oil control ring. And then we'll go ahead and clean all this up really well, lube it up, clean the cylinders, because I guarantee you those are not going to be clean from machining stuff and the junk they put in there. Oil it up lightly, and then she'll be about ready for assembly. And it's going to do that 3 more times. Oh, and something else real quick. Since this is cylinder 4, we have the rings for that one done. I'm actually going to mark the arrow that goes towards the flywheel, so it's a little easier to see. And I'll mark this one number 4. Now we're good. Now that you've got everything cleaned up, that rag was clean. That was the first pass with a little brake cleaner on the inside of the cylinder. Yeah, so we're gonna do a little looby with some motor oil. Gonna keep everything nice and clean, lubed up. Do the same thing on our ring pack here, just to make sure. Doesn't take a whole lot. Just work that around real well. Now with our setting our rings back in, you actually want to clock them. So there's your arrow pointing towards the flywheel. So this is going to be up. So you actually want the split in your oil control ring to be top. I like to put this ring right around 1, 2 o'clock, this ring right around 9, 10 o'clock. So you never want anything towards the bottom side because, well, that's the bottom of your cylinder. You don't want to smoke, right? Stagger your compression rings so you don't lose compression. Now it's just a matter of taking your ring compressor. I still use this one. This one's not the right size for this one, but my other one broke, so I don't feel like using the ratcheting one. That one drives me nuts. And I just start. Yep, felt it stop. We didn't have them fully compressed. Double check our rings. May have to use that other one. This one's for 85.5s and these are 92s, so sometimes I can get it to work. There we go. Now all we need to do is just tap it down until you start to see the wrist pin hole. And that's it. This one is prepped and ready to go. Let's go ahead and knock out the other 3 and we'll be done. Another thing you want to do is you want to take your cylinder before you fully assemble it and lap it into the head with some lapping compound. That just ensures that you get a nice smooth sealing surface and everything's nice and flat all the way around. Because remember, these don't run head gaskets, and that's another reason why you mark cylinder 1, 2, 2, yada yada yada. So now we need to go ahead and move on to removing these dual springs and put in single springs. We don't need dual springs for Engle 110 camshaft. So all we need to do there they go. All right, finally got that off there. Those single grooves were really on there. We're going to take our keeper off the top, our retainer. Now with these particular high revs, it really doesn't matter which is top, which is bottom. Check our valve. Valve actually feels really good. No play, slides nice, excellent. reassemble. And I got the fan on the whole time. Sorry, it's hot. All right, keepers are in. There we go. That one is done. Now to move on to the next one. All right, one head down, one head to go. No, it's not fun using this style, but I like it better than the bench one. Plus I had that, so why not use it? There we go, we got all of our springs installed. Now we just need to clean up the heads. Verified all the valves and guides are good. So let's go ahead and clean them up a tad, but these have already been cleaned up on the inside. Ben did a nice job smoothing those ports out, man. Whew, this thing's gonna run so nice. All right, head number 2. Heads are done. Now we need to go ahead and start prepping our cylinders. We've got cylinder 1 and 2 sitting here. Make sure your sealing surface here on the case and all of your shims are clean of any oils, debris, anything of that nature. Now we're going to take our sealant of choice, use what you like. I like a little bit of RTV, ultra black. We're going to do a thin layer all the way around. Doesn't take much. Go ahead and put our first shim down. Make sure that your grooves line up for your cylinders because they are slightly off. There we go. Same thing. Very thin layer again. And then take your second shim. Same thing. Make sure your grooves are lined up properly. And then one last coat. Now that that's done, we want to go ahead and install our wrist pin. And if you notice, we've got our flat side. So we want to go and install our C-clip on the inside and install our wrist pin from the other side. Take your wrist pin with your C-clip. There's a sharp side that goes out. There we go, wrist pin is in. And if you notice, you can actually turn it. It's in the groove. So now what we'll do is go ahead and oil up our wrist pin, slide it in just a little bit, and that one's ready to assemble. Now we can go ahead and put our C-clip on this side, wrist pin clip, and it rotates. We're good. Now we've made sure our arrows are pointing towards the flywheel, everything's clocked. Now comes the fun part of the, don't forget these, air deflectors. It can kind of be fun on this side because of the case hardware. Now we can take our cylinder 1 head, drop it on. Now with your pushrod tubes, you have a seam that faces up towards the head. These are a windage tube, so if you notice, it's got more sticking out on one end than the other. Those go down in the case. I also like to take like a 13 millimeter, stick it in the end, and kind of expand it ever so slightly. Again, something I do, you do you. I like to run just a little bit of sealant on the inside of the washers, only inside the head not on the outside. So that's the initial torque. Now I'll go ahead and go up to final torque. Well, one side down, one side to go. Everything went well. Everything's just snug because of these big chromoly 10mm head studs that, you know, this case takes. So everything's definitely a little snugger, trying to get the cylinders on and the heads on. Nothing wrong with that. That's just the way it is with 10mm over 8mm head studs. All right, time to get 3/4 side done. Let's do it. All right, we got our solid rockers built. Basically, you're just gonna sit there and take the shims that come in the kit. I like to kind of spread them out. These are around 15,000, so those are around 27. Got some 57s and a couple 59s. So I like to kind of organize them so I can kind of see. But once you put this on there, you don't want much more than a thou or two play. You don't want much. So those are nice side to side. And we went ahead and put our, this is a little Engle iron piece I use for my dial indicator. So we went ahead and put that on there. We go ahead and get our half lift, and well, camera angle sucks, but yeah, we're about there. Now, because these have the dreaded swivel feet, I don't like them. You know, these little flat spot, little ball bearing thing on the end keeps you from having to use lash caps. The kit does come with a bunch of different spacers for underneath the rocker stands. This is one of the reasons you got to do rocker arm geometry. Now, in our situation with 40 thousandths deck, we're able to use stock length chromoly push rods, and I've got 4 shims underneath each pedestal, and that gets us exactly where we need to be. Now, if you notice, that nut is a little bit different looking. That nut is actually a head stud nut, 8mm head stud nut, so the outside is actually a 15, not a 13. Do not use the little nylock washers that come in the kit. These are very soft, and if you're running high RPM, high lift, things like that, they will strip out. So I like to use the head stud nuts, extra security. So also, when you do your rocker shaft assemblies, you want to make sure these things not even sitting flat. I hate these. You don't want this dead center. You want it slightly offset, and that's to help keep your valves rotating when they move. So as you see here, you don't want them too far offside, you don't want them dead straight, you want them just slightly off center. That helps the valve rotate a little bit every time that the valve opens and closes. So again, these are stock length chromoly push rods. These are the bug pack, or as they say, bug pack. So we're looking good. I think we just need to go ahead and keep buttoning it up, keep pushing along. Now, one thing you want to make sure you do with your chromoly push rods is you want to flush those out with brake clean and compressed air. And to set your valves, you don't use a feeler gauge. You want to make sure that you can just spin that push rod around. That's how you know you got it right. So you don't hear any clatter, but I can just spin that push rod around. So we'll go ahead and do the same on this one. And this side will be about done, minus one thing I like to do, soak it down with some oil, just to help make sure that everything is kind of pre-lubed a tad. That's probably a bit much, but that's all right. And then we'll just go ahead and spin it over a few times, make sure everything's good. Well, that's pretty much it for this weekend. Quite a bit done. Looking good. Now, you know, a lot of people ask me, Gary, why do you not put in the distributor drive gear when the case is still split? I don't, because I don't like the distributor hanging there when I'm working on the 3/4 side. It's just one more thing to accidentally bump. Not to mention, with the distributor drive gear tool, it's real easy just to drop the thing down in there and you're done. Today, John came over, and yeah, we've got the carbs on it. We are getting really close to firing up. We already set oil pressure, verified we have oil pressure, so we're good to go there. He left to go get some fuel. Gonna mock up exhaust on it. So basically, this is a 1968 cc engine, which is a thick wall 92 with a 74 stroke crank, 110 cam. Got a set of IDFs on there. I think those are 44s. We just threw them on there just to kind of get it running, you know what I mean? May not be the carbs staying on there. He may put Delortos on there. I don't know. He's got stuff everywhere at his house. He's got good stuff. So, we built oil pressure. He went down to get fuel. I think we're about ready to go ahead and fire this thing up and do the cam break-in. So, I will set you guys off to the side, cross our fingers, and we'll hit the button and see what happens. Stay tuned. Fuel, make sure we start going in. Gravity feeding. Oh, we're leaking. It's the filter on the bottom. Right there. Not seeing anything out of the ordinary now. And we're just gravity feeding it still. We got squirts. Got squirts on that side. Squirts on that side. We're about ready. You want to work the throttle? Ready? fine. that's a success.
You want to run the fuel out of the carbs?
Yeah, we can if you want. Well, she ran and didn't blow up, so I guess that's a plus. Well, at least that's what John said.
Yay!
Yay! So we got some fans on her, cooling her down. We're gonna go ahead and load her on up in his TDI and take her home. But man, the only issue we had was a couple little drops out of both valve covers, which seems to be my nemesis. And for some reason, cylinder 3 was running pretty lean, so that's what a lot of the popping was with cylinder 3. So it could be a plug wire. These are used plug wires I had. Could be we didn't go through the carbs or anything like that. We just slammed them on there. So you know, there's a couple things it could be, but overall, man, she ran great. Didn't run too hot. Oil pressure was great. I'm loving it. Absolutely loving it. I think this is going to be great for whatever, you know, piece of fleet of VWs he puts it in. He's over there laughing. He doesn't want to be on camera. So anyway, guys, that's pretty much it. We're going to let her cool down, and from there, disconnect her, throw him in his car, and this one's out of here. So we'll give you a progress update later down the road and let you know how she's doing. But till then, be kind and be good.